Hello, I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. Coming into March, it is time to assess February grazing and look forward to the remainder of the first rotation. Dairy farmer Mike Bermingham joins us to explain how he achieved 30% grazed in the last month despite some difficult weather conditions, and his plans to maintain high levels of grazed grass in the diet for the month ahead.
Things have gone fairly good, to be honest. As of last Monday, there, around the 1st of March, we had 32% of the farm grazed. The calving has gone well enough. We have about just over 70% of the cows calved now. We had a very busy 3 weeks. We were very busy for 3 weeks, let's say, and it's after slowing down now, obviously. And yeah, it went very well now. Cow health was good. We had 2 cases of milk fever. Besides that, everything else went pretty good. Calf health was good. We were just managing to get the cows out 90% of the time to 95% of the time, I'd say. So yeah, we're really happy with the spring, you know.
Yeah, and I suppose you've hit that first milestone, the 30% grazed by the 1st of March. And look, by and large, weather has been good, you know, a super January and into early February. Now, it did get difficult and there was stormy weather and some snow, maybe about 10 days ago.
Yes.
So how did you negotiate that difficult weather, Mike?
Yeah, but look, I'll tell you, like you said there at the start, we had a super start to the grazing season. We actually managed to graze 1 or 2 very wet fields on the first week or two. After that, then let's say the weather turned broken, so we did a lot of on-off grazing. The on-off grazing a bit tricky to get the silage right at night was the only issue we had, to be honest. Look, we'd let let's say we'll take it from the morning. We'd milk the cows there at 7, half 7. By the time we'd have all the jobs done and the colostrum cows milked and new calves fed and everything, it could be 10 o'clock, maybe 10:15. We'd make the cows, the milking herd would be just held in the yard for a bit. We'd make the decision then whether we'd go out or not. 99% of the time we did go out because the cows would be nearly breaking down the gate to get out. So we'd let the cows out, and as long as it stayed dry, we'd let the cows out. Let's say they'd stay out until till 3 o'clock or 3:30. If it was broken, when they'd stop grazing, let's say it could be broken. If it started raining around 12 o'clock and the cows started coming to the ditch, we'd bring the cows in at 12 o'clock. But normally we'd try and leave them out till 3 or 3:30. We'd milk again then in the evening, get them back out again till about 9 o'clock, let's say, and bring them in then and give them silage. The only issue we had with the silage was we probably, at the start, we were giving them way too much silage, and they weren't as sharp as they should be going out, let's say. You know, that's why we held them in the yard so long in the morning, let's say. We didn't let them out after milking. We just said we'd give them a little bit of an edge to get out and get grazing.
And Mike, you know, we hear every year, you know, one of the ways of getting out when weather is difficult is on-off grazing. And it is something that Teagasc would promote. But in practice, some farmers would say, oh, you know, I am going out in the middle of the day. So you talk around 12 o'clock. And then also you're going out at 9 o'clock at night to bring in cows. And, you know, some farmers are more inclined to just leave them in the shed and say the weather will settle down, we'll get them out maybe next week. So, you know, why would you push getting out for those 2 grazing bouts during the day?
Well, I suppose, to be honest, I suppose the way I look at it is it's still nearly easier to let them out than to, like, it only takes me half an hour maybe to put up the reel and let them out. But like Emma-Louise, if I don't let them out, I have to, like the day of the snow, for instance, now I kept the cows in for the whole day. So you have to go, let's say you milk your cows, you clean your cubicles, you line your cubicles, you have to go loading out silage. That's just the work side of it. You have to do all that again in the evening, push in the silage, whereas I can just open the gap. I can just open the gate, let the cows out, let them have a graze, I can turn them back in again then a couple of hours afterwards. There's no panic on getting the silage out or getting the liming done and all this crack done. I'll have that done at my ease. Instead of doing it twice a day, I only have to do it once a day. Do you know? So it just makes my life a bit. I know it doesn't sound right, let's say, but it's just easier let them out, to be honest. And I know people will be saying, "Oh, you're doing too much damage and all that," but you can. The damage isn't. We don't find we're over. Like you have to. I suppose you have to go out and walk your farm and see where's the handiest place to let them. So it's we know it's going to rain tonight, let's say, for instance. So where are we going to put the cows that it's going to be handy to get them back in again, that they won't do much travelling? You know, like last night, for instance, now we left in the cows because we left them out for an hour or two and we brought them back in again. But we put them in a place that it wasn't too bad to let them in. It wasn't a big job. Like when they hear the quad coming to the gap, they'll come up to the gap, you open the gap and they'll walk away in at their ease. You know, it's not a big deal.
You have them very well trained, Mike.
I don't know. They do. They come in and it's easier, you know. But it's just a bit. I think it just takes a bit of the pressure off the intense workload in the yard every day. If they're out and you don't have the cost of the silage and you don't have the cost of the slurry, like I'm not even going to get into about it's worth $270. I don't think of that. I think it's just making my life that bit easier, that they're getting out, they're cleaner being milked, they're less mastitis. We'd only one case of mastitis in a cow so far this year. It just takes the strain off you, like, let's say, you know. Maybe it doesn't sound right now, but I think personally, I think it does. And all it is really is maybe, like, we haven't got the farm set up perfect for on-off grazing, we'll say yet, but like I would say to people now, and I'm going to do it this year myself, is I'm watching where I'm putting them in and out, and can I put a gap there? Do you know, make a gap there? Like I've knocked a few holes through ditches now so that they can come out onto road, onto farm roadways, let's say. Just that's another little corner they can go into without making too much of a mess. Do you know what I mean?
And I totally hear you, Mike, and I think it does make a lot of sense. And, you know, what you're talking about is you're spreading the workload with things like putting out the bit of silage and scraping and liming because you're going to do that throughout the day, as opposed to having it done by 9 o'clock in the morning in order to have the cows back in the shed.
Exactly, that's my point, yeah, exactly.
I think another interesting point you made there at the start, you know, identifying paddocks that you would define as wet, and given the mild winter we've had, that you actually had the ability to graze them early. And, you know, often you're leaving them on the long finger, and if a wet week comes in early March, you're kind of snookered and you can't get to them. So that's a really, really interesting point. Looking, I guess, to the next month. So, you know, we're here now in early March, and, you know, talk through your plan for the remainder of the first rotation, Mike. You know, what does the plan look like?
Right, I suppose I've got the 30% graze now, okay? So that'll feed the cows for the first couple of days, and that'll feed the cows for the start of the second round, okay? So the plan is now to walk the farm. We'll have to walk the farm religiously every week from now on, let's say once a week, because what we've let's say on the 1st of March now, we've farm cover of 1,000, okay? So we don't want to let the farm cover drop under 600 because we're north facing, we're high up, it is colder, let's say it's a bit slower to grow, so we have to watch what grass we have. So what we will do is we'll walk the farm once a week. We won't let the cover drop more than 70 per week, let's say. So next week now we'll be down to 930, okay? So another thing we have to watch is what's coming back on the first paddock. So let's say we take Patrick's Day, for instance. We need to have about 750 around Patrick's Day on our first graze paddocks, because look, there'll be another 20 days before they'll be needed for the second round, and you'll probably be growing maybe mid-20s to 30, let's say. So that'll give you another 600 hopefully. So that'll give you up around the 1,300 to start the second round. So that's very important, I suppose, that we have enough of grass to start, that there's enough of grass after growing back to start the second round. And then another point is around Patrick's Day not to have the farm cover drop below 800, because if we're gone, let's say if we're at 750 for 700, we've only another 100 left for the next 2 weeks, for 3 weeks nearly at that stage. So they are two important things. We're kind of gone away now from I know the spring rotation planner would say you need to graze another 30% by Patrick's Day and the remaining 40% for the rest of the second round. But what we found has happened to us is when we do that, let's say it works very well, but we've no grass. We've left our farm cover run down too low. Like 1 or 2 years, I've left it drop to under 400, and we've no grass to start the second round. So that meant the month of April was very heavy supplementation then at that stage. So.
And I think that's a proactive tip, nearly, Mike, for other farmers. It's you have your spring rotation planner, but I suppose that in combination with the farm cover is really what's important for you. And say, based on that, target that you have, you're at 1,000 of a farm cover now, and you're looking at a drop of 70 kilograms dry matter in terms of farm cover per week. What will the diet look like in the cows in the month of March?
I suppose, to be honest, Emma-Louise, the cows are on 4 kilos of nuts at the moment. Okay. What we are going to do is we'll measure the grass weekly, and what I'm going to do is just top them up. We have about 70 or 80 good bales of high quality silage in the yard, and normally I go up to 5 or 6 kilos of ration, but the way the price of ration is at the moment, and I have these high quality bales, like bales don't carry over, as they could get damaged over. So I'm going to use these. I don't know, am I right or wrong now to be doing this, but I'm going to give the cows access to silage while they're being milked, just to fill them up a small bit, let's say, just to put in that extra kilo a day or 2 kilos of feed a day, let's say. Like 50 of my cows can eat 50 or 60 of the cows can eat silage at the one time. The rest of them will be queuing up to be milked. They'll go out and eat grass, and let's say the last couple of rounds will be more or less full of silage. So it should... it should balance itself out that way, hopefully, without having to put in too much effort into it, we would say.
And it's an interesting point that you make, in previous years where you haven't kept an eye on farm cover and you've dipped to that 400, you really, really need grass in April when you are preparing cows for breeding. So I suppose this is a management tool to ensure that you don't run short at that time.
Exactly. That's the main thing, is that we have plenty of grass. Like, we don't want to really be putting in silage in April, and we don't really want to be having the cows too tight. They need a good, they need to be building, like, realistically speaking, at the end of March, we want to be able to take the strip wire away from the cows, and we want them at full flow then, like, we want to have enough of grass on the farm that we can take out the strip wire and give them 36-hour grazings, that they'll be fully fed, without having to put in silage then, Well, hopefully now the weather will play ball with me too, like,
Absolutely, and I suppose there's no guaranteeing that, of course.
No.
Mike, you also mentioned that you had 2 cases of milk fever and a case of mastitis this spring. I suppose we would have spoken very recently with the moo vet, Eamon O'Connell, and he talked about significant levels of milk fever on farms, and really early on, which is uncharacteristic of milk fever. But I suppose, you're obviously not experiencing major ailments on the farm in February. So what do you put that down to?
Look, to be honest, Emma-Louise, not this year, but 2 years ago, we had an awful outbreak of milk fever, and even we had a fair bit of it as well last year. But what we put, I'd say we could have out of 100 cows, we could have had 40 clinical cases of mastitis, or not mastitis, but milk fever 2 years ago. The vet was nearly just coming on his own at that stage, let's say, But the past 2 years now, what we've done is we've condition scored the cows at drying off, and the March calvers got another condition scored in late January. And what we're doing is we're feeding the cows straw once a week, At the moment now, I've switched to twice a week for the straw feeding because I feel the cows are getting little bit too heavy fat again. Let's say they've too much flesh up them, so we're feeding straw now twice a week. We're kind of restricting the silage is good enough quality. So we're restricting the silage to an extent. Let's say we wouldn't worry about them not having silage. All my cow, I suppose we're lucky in a sense that all the cows, let's say, I have to make this point, is all the cows can eat silage together. So when we feed the cows, they can all come up and eat together. So they're all taking in what they need. So we don't worry too much about them. Let's say we'd feed them there before milking at 3 o'clock in the evening. We put out the silage and when, let's say, the following morning at 7 o'clock, then would only be a small bit of silage we pushed in. We push that in, but we won't feed them again until 3 o'clock. Let's say they'll be left without for a couple of hours anyway. So it's just really to keep the cows a bit fitter, we'll call it. They were getting too fat with us all the time. Another thing we did was in the December condition score, like we picked out any very thin cows and we gave them good quality silage and we fed them and they came on lovely. And the very heavy the condition score 4s, we fed them hay. It was about 5 or 6 of them and we fed them hay for the winter to try and knock the bit of flesh off. And we didn't, to be honest, when we condition scored them again, we didn't knock much off them, to be honest, but they just naturally had it, But that's
it's an interesting comment, Mike, and I think it's a consequence of breeding genetics. Good genetics in herds. Higher EBI animals tend to have a higher body condition score.
They do actually, to be honest.
And then naturally cows tend to put on condition in later lactation. So I suppose that proactive step you're talking about, doing the dry off body condition score, is probably preventing a lot of that I suppose problem and workload in the springtime.
It is. And another point we did was we did a mineral analysis on the silage as well, and it wasn't the K, it wasn't the issue, but like before in our milk fever about 2 years ago, it was probably 3 or 4 things together. Like the K might have been, it was within the limits, but it was at the higher end of the limits, we'll say. The cows were too heavy. They were crossbred cows. They were more susceptible to it. There was probably 3 or 4 small things, but when they all accumulated together, it gave a big break. Let's say you had a lot of cases then, you had a lot of cases then, whereas I suppose we're managing the diet a bit better now. Like 2 years ago, we'd have been up, first thing we'd have done was fed the cows because they hadn't silage in front of them, let's say. But now we're trying to, I suppose there was more training in me than the cows. Like the cows don't ever actually roar or anything that they don't have silage in front of them, or, they're quite contented, to be honest.
Yeah, just reprogramming yourself.
Yeah, myself,
Mike,
more than the cows, to be honest,
And if we step back, Mike, and, away from spring and look at the overall grazing picture for the year, what are your targets that you're going to set yourself for 2022? And, are there any tweaks that you're going to make from experience in last year's grazing season or the grazing season of 2020?
Yeah, we are actually, Emma-Louise, what we've decided to do, I suppose, normally we'd stock up the farm at 4 cows to the hectare, right? And for the main grazing season from, let's say, mid-April to the start of August, or the 15th of August, we'd stock up the farm at 4 cows to the hectare. But that would set the demand, let's say, with 2 kilos of nuts at 72. So we're finding that we're constantly putting in extra feed. We're running out of grass, we're putting in extra feed, we're up to 4 kilos. Let's say, you could say on average, we were probably feeding 3 or 4 kilos throughout the summer, which was very, very, well, it will be very expensive this year, we'll say. So what we've decided to do this year now is drop back the stocking rate a bit and set the demand at 65. So 65 is kind of the average, what they would say you grow in Moore Park for the entire grazing season. So that's what we're going to do, so that we'll end up hopefully feeding less meal. And as well as that, then we're part of the clover study inside Moore Park, where we're oversowing portions of the farm with clover. So we'll be oversowing about 20%. We did 30% last year, and this year we must oversow about 20%. So that 20% needs to be treated like a brand new reseed, we'll call it. So it needs to be grazed at 1,000 to 1,100 all the time, and with a reduced nitrogen rate as well, obviously. And for that reason as well, we need to drop the stocking rate slightly so that we can encourage the new clovers to grow, let's say, and that we'll be able to get in around it faster, and we'll have a bit more grass in the other paddocks, let's say, to do that. I don't know, am I explaining myself right in that?
Yeah, absolutely. But give us a little bit more detail on that, considering you've done it last year. So last year you oversowed 30% of the farm with white clover, and what you're saying is you're doing another 20% this year, but you're treating it like a brand new reseed. Tell us a little bit more about that, Mike.
Yeah, so last year what we did was we had got seed for 30% of the farm. I also did a proper reseed. Let's say I reseeded 15% of the platform last year, and that got 2 kilos of white clover as well. To be honest, if you want clover, the gold standard is a proper reseed and 2 kilos, and manage it correctly for the rest of the year. But to try and get more clover onto the farm, everyone will probably have to do a bit of oversowing. So we did 30% now last year, and it was very tricky to manage the 30%. It was all sat into one space for a week, let's say, and it was very tricky to manage, because that meant you had to have 30% of your farm, which probably was 60% of your grazing platform, to be grazed at 1,000. So you were constantly trying not to let that get too strong and graze it. And as well as that, then we've reduced our chemical nitrogen, let's say, on that. We probably, instead of spreading 20 units around, we were on 14 units around. Now, they would say that you only need to do that for probably 2 or 3 rounds, only go with the lower rate of nitrogen, but we continued with the lower rate of nitrogen till the end of the season, because we felt that to give the clover every chance of growing, that the less nitrogen we were putting on, the less competition the grass, it had less competition from the grass. So so this year now, the trial is they're cutting it back a bit. They're doing 20% of the farm, and we won't oversow the 20% together. We'll probably do it over the space of a month. That'll give us a chance, let's say, that we don't have to, you might only have 1 paddock a week that you have to watch in, that will be at a lower cover. So, and obviously last year's clover paddocks we set will be on a lower rate of nitrogen. We'll be on maybe 10 to 12 units is what I'm thinking in my own head of using on those paddocks to try and reduce the chemical nitrogen. And let's say more use of soil water. If it gets soil water, or some let's say the properly reseeded paddocks last year, that 15 acres is going to get soil water for the rest of the season. Hopefully, we'll try and avoid we'll use chemical in to the correct level up to the start of May. Let's say we'll put out our 60 units now by early April, and we might give it another 20 units after that. But after that, then it'll be maybe 10 units for the rest of the season. Hopefully.
I suppose you're going to look to your nitrogen to start fixing, to do some of the work in growing the grass. I think that's a really interesting comment that you make, and I suppose, as you say, that 30% oversowing represents a high proportion of your grazing platform. And if you're targeting that amount of your ground at 1,000 kilograms of a pre-grazing, you're effectively trying to balance 2 grass wedges for 1 herd of cows. So I can imagine it was a challenge, and that idea of targeting 20% this year but splitting it up will hopefully make life a whole lot easier for you, Mike.
Hopefully, anyway. It should too, to be honest. And I suppose if I wasn't part of the trial, I suppose the way I have it in my own head now, and this is only myself talking, is that I would let's say everyone should be targeting a 10% reseed, right? And you put in your 2 kilos of clover with that and treat that right. But I'd also be targeting another 10% of the farm with it for oversowing. And I think if you did that, let's say 10% of the farm, obviously now your P&K and your lime status must be very good now, or else, like if you don't have your lime correct or your P's and K's correct, I think you're probably wasting your time, to be honest. But if you did 10% every year with your 10% reseeding, I think it'd be a great job, to be honest, to get clover onto farms. And,
this has been a great opportunity to catch up, Mike, and talk about, as I said, the first milestone of the first rotation. When we look to the 1st of March, and it hasn't been without its challenges, particularly in the second half of February. So you, like many other farmers, need to be commended for the efforts in on-off grazing and going out in the dark at 9 o'clock at night to bring in cows. I suppose also some really interesting tips from you in particular. This is the time now to really keep an eye on what's coming back in terms of paddocks grazed and that the farm cover as well as percentages grazed. Your weekly walk is really going to support that, and it'll give you an idea of where the deficits are going to come. Also, I think your idea of managing body condition score throughout the dry period is something that is going to relieve work and problems that will arise in the spring. So hugely insightful conversation. Thank you, Mike.
No bother, Emma-Louise. Thanks for having me on.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast. And my thanks to Mike Bermingham for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.